Ye must be born again. That's what Jesus said. That's what he said to Nicodemus. And he began to describe these things to us. He began to talk about the contrast between the spiritual life and the spiritual awareness and the things of the flesh. And then he said to Nicodemus, he said, here you are, a ruler of the Jews, and you don't know these things? Well, it's very important that we understand this and we comprehend this, that when we come to that place in our lives to where our spiritual eyes are open and we've been enlightened, as we've discovered that word here in the book of Ephesians, then here the Apostle Paul begins to talk about the contrast between the new perspective in your enlightenment, where you begin to realize that you are a spiritual person, that you have the ability to connect with a spiritual God. But he says before that, you were dead in your trespasses and sins, and in times past you walked according to the course of the world. You followed the world and all of its destruction. And then he said you were serving the prince of the power of the air, and you were living as a child in a spirit of disobedience. Now, listen to this. He said, this is what the old mindset was before you were enlightened. He says, you followed after the lust of the flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and mind. Now, I want you just a moment, if you will, with me. Just think about the things that you've heard about here in this old world in the last 24 hours, watching your television, listening on the radio, reading the newspapers, and you hear about all of these things that people do and how they do horrible things one to another, and how that humanity lies and cheats and steals and commits murder and all of these things. And you say, how does this happen? Why is the world so full of evil and corruption? Well, here, the Apostle Paul just told us the mindset, lust of the flesh, fulfilling all the desires of the flesh, driven, led by the desires of our flesh by nature, he says. Again, Ephesians chapter 2, verse number 3. By nature, the children of wrath. Now, that's a pretty apt description that the Apostle Paul is giving to us. And in my mind, he just nailed it right there. He described that human person who has not yet been enlightened. And they don't even realize they're spiritual. They think it's all about them. And they're living in those carnal worlds until something happens. And I love hearing the testimonies. The Gideons, a wonderful organization, the Gideons. And sometimes they invite pastors to bring our wives and go to a nice dinner, and they always have people there sharing testimonies. And I love the testimonies of people who, some of them were in jail, and there they became enlightened. They came to an awareness that they were spiritual, that there was a spiritual God, there were spiritual things going on all around them. And they just changed. Right then and there, they changed. Everything about their mindset changed because they opened their eyes to the possibility of spiritual things. It's Pastor Jack King with the gospel on the radio broadcast.